Tonight, we are going to travel into a world before switches, before glowing screens, before electric lamps-filled bedrooms, streets, shops, kitchens, factories, and roads with a steady artificial brightness. Before the night became something we could push back with one small movement of a finger. For most of human history, when the sun went down, the world changed. Not slightly, completely. The fields darkened, the lanes between houses disappeared into shadow. The workshop bench became hard to see. The road through the forest became uncertain. The river turned black. The sky became larger. The stars became clearer. And people, who had spent the daylight working, walking, trading, harvesting, washing, grinding, mending, cooking, building, carrying, praying, bargaining, tending animals and watching children, slowly came indoors. They did not simply turn on a lamp and continue the day. They adjusted, they slowed down, they listened, they protected the fire, they closed the shutters, they checked the door latch, they gathered near warmth, they spoke more quietly, they saved their candles, they watched the flame. And in that older world, surviving the night was not one single skill. It was a whole way of living. It was architecture. It was habit. It was cooperation. It was caution. It was storytelling. It was memory. It was knowing the moon, knowing the sound of your own animals, knowing when the wind was changing, knowing where the embers were buried, knowing which path was safe after dark, knowing not to waste light, knowing that darkness was not empty. It was simply full of things that daylight made easier to ignore. So tonight, slowly and gently, we will step into that older darkness. We will walk through cottages, castles, monasteries, farms, villages, ancient cities, winter roads, candlelit rooms and quiet streets. We will see how people cooked, worked, slept, prayed, protected themselves, told stories, cared for children, kept animals safe, and waited for morning. And there is no need to remember everything. There is no need to stay alert. This is only a slow journey through the night before electricity, a soft history of darkness, a quiet look at how people lived when the evening belonged to fire, moonlight, and rest. So settle in. Let the room around you become still. Let the day loosen its grip. And imagine, far away and long ago, the last light of the sun slipping behind a line of trees. Before electricity, sunset was not just a beautiful moment. It was an instruction. It told people that work must change. It told farmers to bring in tools. It told shepherds to count animals. It told merchants to close shutters. It told children to come closer to home. It told travelers to find shelter. It told cooks to prepare the evening meal before the room became too dim. It told everyone that the day was ending, whether they were ready or not. In the modern world, time is precise. We divide it into minutes and seconds. We can work long after sunset under white ceiling lights. We can shop at midnight. We can read at 2 in the morning. We can answer messages in bed. But in the older world, time was softer, larger, and more physical. Morning had a smell, noon had a heat, evening had a color, night had a temperature, and sunset was the great transition. In villages, people began preparing before darkness arrived. A woman might pull laundry from a line while there was still enough light to see stains and folds. A boy might be sent to fetch water before the path to the well became difficult. A man might bring firewood closer to the doorway. An older child might gather chickens into a coop. A baker might cover the remaining loaves. A blacksmith might bank the forge. A monk might hear the bell for evening prayer. A sailor might watch the horizon, reading wind and cloud before the night watch began. The whole world seemed to lean toward preparation, because once darkness came, everything took longer. A simple task like finding a dropped needle could become nearly impossible. Mending a torn sleeve required candlelight, and candlelight cost money. Carrying water became more dangerous. Walking across a muddy yard could mean a fall. Finding an animal that had wandered loose could take hours. So people survived the night by respecting its approach. They did not pretend the night was merely a darker version of day. They treated it as a different country, a country with its own rules, its own dangers, its own beauty. In many places, the evening meal was timed around fading light. Cooking over a fire was easier when one could still see the pot, the knife, the bread, the herbs, the small bones in the fish, the color of the stew. Once the light was gone, meals became simpler. A bowl of porridge, a piece of bread, cheese, onions, ale. Soup kept warm near the hearth, leftovers from midday. Food was not only nourishment, it was part of the night's defense. A warm meal calmed the body. A full stomach helped sleep. A full stomach helped sleep. The shared fire kept people together. And togetherness mattered. A household gathered around a hearth was safer than scattered people moving through darkness. Outside, the last workers returned. Carts creaked. Hooves struck packed earth. Dogs barked once, then settled. Smoke rose from roofs. The color drained from the road, and the first small lights appeared. A candle in a window, a lantern in a stable, a fire seen through the open door of an inn, a torch carried by someone crossing a courtyard, not enough to conquer the dark, only enough to make small islands inside it. This is one of the most important things to understand about the night before electricity. People did not live in brightness, they lived in pools of light. A candle did not illuminate a room the way a bulb does. It created a circle. Close to the flame, one could see hands, faces, bowls, thread, tools and pages. Beyond that circle, furniture dissolved into shadow. Corners became uncertain. Ceilings disappeared. A room became smaller at night. A house became a cluster of warm spaces surrounded by dark silence. And this changed behavior. People moved closer together, they shared light. They saved tasks requiring good vision for daylight. They allowed the night to reduce the world. And in that reduction there was inconvenience, yes, but there was also rhythm, a natural narrowing, a slow invitation to stop. Long before candles, lamps, cities, roads, clocks, churches, castles, and written calendars, there was fire. Fire was the oldest answer to darkness. It gave light. It gave heat. It cooked food. It scared some animals away. It dried wet clothing. It hardened clay. It changed wood to charcoal. It changed ore to metal. It gathered people into circles. And at night, fire gave the human mind something steady to look at. The hearth was not just a place in the house. It was the center of survival. In many homes, the fire never truly went out if the family could help it. Starting a fire from nothing took effort. Matches, as we know them, came very late in history. Before easy ignition, people used flint and steel, fire drills, embers, tinder, charcloth, dry moss, straw, fungus, and great patience. So when evening came, one of the most important domestic tasks was not simply lighting the fire, it was keeping it alive. At night, a family might bank the fire. This meant arranging ashes over the embers so they would smolder slowly until morning. The flames would die down, the room would darken, but beneath the ash, a red heart remained. In the morning, someone could stir the ashes, add dry kindling, blow gently, and coax the household back into warmth. This little preserved glow was precious. It saved labor, it saved time, it might even save life in winter. Imagine a cold cottage before dawn. The walls are stone, clay, timber, or wattle and daub. The floor may be packed earth. The bed is not far from the hearth because heat matters. Outside, frost rests on the grass. Inside, the air is stale and cold. A child stirs under wool blankets. An older woman rises first. She wraps a shawl around her shoulders, steps carefully across the dim room, and kneels by the hearth. There is no switch, no thermostat, no blue digital clock, only ashes. She moves them aside with an iron tool. A tiny red glow appears. She adds straw, then a sliver of dry wood. She bends close and breathes slowly. The ember brightens. Smoke curls. A small flame catches. Morning begins. This was survival. Quiet, repetitive, ordinary survival. The fire also shaped sleeping arrangements. In colder climates, people often slept near one another. not always from affection, though affection may have been there. They did it because bodies produce heat. Children slept together. Servants might sleep near kitchens or halls. Animals sometimes shared the same building or a room nearby, adding warmth and sound. In some houses, the distinction between human space and animal space was not as sharp as it is now. A cow, goat, or pig under the same roof was not merely a smell or inconvenience. It was wealth, it was warmth, it was safety, it was food security, it was part of the household economy. The hearth also protected against the emotional weight of darkness. A dark room can make the mind wander. A flame gives the eyes a task. It moves gently, it crackles, it changes shape without becoming threatening. It is alive but contained. Around it, people could speak, repair tools, tell stories, sing quietly, pray, watch sparks rise and vanish into the chimney smoke. But fire was also dangerous. Many old buildings were made of wood, thatch, straw, cloth, and dried materials. A careless spark could destroy a home. A toppled candle could burn a room. An untended hearth could fill a space with smoke. A chimney fire could spread quickly. So surviving the night meant balancing dependence and caution. People needed flame. They also feared it. In towns, rules often developed around fire. Some cities required fires to be covered at night. Curfew, in its older meaning, is connected with covering the fire. The evening bell did not only signal social order, it reminded households to make the night safer. Cover the fire, close the shop, put away the tools, withdraw from the street, let the city sleep. Even in large homes and castles, where there might be many hearths, torches, rushlights, and servants, fire management was constant. Someone had to carry embers, someone had to trim wicks, someone had to remove ashes, someone had to make sure a hall did not fill with smoke, someone had to wake early enough to revive the heat before the household fully stirred. The night before electricity was not silent laborlessness, it was full of small tending the fire, tending the wick, tending the animals, tending the locks, tending the body against cold, tending the mind against fear, and always, somewhere, a flame. Today, light is so cheap that we often forget it is there. A hallway lamp may burn for hours, a phone screen glows in a pocket, a refrigerator opens and lights itself, a street lamp shines all night for strangers. But before electricity, light had a cost that people felt directly. A candle was not just light, it was material, labor, animal fat, beeswax, tallow, oil, a wick, a maker, a buyer, time. And because light cost something, darkness had economic power. Poor households could not simply flood rooms with candles. They used the fire, they used rushlights, they used daylight whenever possible. They went to bed earlier in winter, or at least reduced activity. They performed delicate work near windows during the day. They did not waste a candle on tasks that could wait. Tallow candles, made from animal fat, were common but smoky, and often unpleasant in smell. Beeswax candles burned cleaner and smelled sweeter, but they were more expensive. In churches, monasteries, wealthy homes, and ceremonial settings, beeswax could create a different kind of night, golden, sacred, and perfumed. In humbler spaces, light might be dim, flickering, greasy, and brief. Oil lamps existed in many ancient cultures and remained important across regions. Olive oil, fish oil, whale oil, sesame oil, and other fuels could feed a flame. In some places, a small clay lamp with a spout and wick might provide a soft glow. In others, metal lamps hung from hooks or rested on tables. But again, fuel mattered. If oil was costly, light was limited. This shaped reading, writing, sewing, accounting, medicine, childcare, even conversation. A bright, modern room encourages activity. A dim, pre-electric room encourages proximity. People sat near the lamp. A person reading aloud might hold the book close. A mother mending cloth might sit where the flame reached her hands. A scribe might work by daylight and stop when shadows made errors likely. A shopkeeper might count money before the light failed. A student might strain his eyes over a precious candle, knowing it would not last. There were also rushlights. These were simple, inexpensive lights made from the pith of rush plants dipped in fat or grease. They could burn for a short time and gave modest light. They were not glamorous, but they were useful. A rushlight might be enough to cross a room, finish a small task, or provide comfort before sleep. In the old night, there were levels of light. The hearth gave warmth and glow. The candle gave a small, controlled flame. The lamp gave a steadier pool. The torch gave portable brightness, but smoke and danger. The moon gave silver visibility outdoors, but only when clouds and lunar phases allowed it. The stars gave beauty more than utility. Snow reflected light. Water reflected light. Whitewashed walls could help brighten a room. Polished metal could catch a flame. Architecture itself could support survival by managing light. Windows mattered, doorways mattered, courtyards mattered. The placement of a hearth mattered. The color of plaster mattered. In some homes, people arranged evening work by the available light. The brightest place was valuable. The seat closest to the flame was valuable. The stable lamp was valuable. A lantern taken outside had to be protected from wind. In cities, public lighting developed slowly and unevenly. Some streets had lanterns, many did not. In some periods and places, residents were required to hang lights outside their homes during certain hours. In other places, people hired link boys or torchbearers to guide them through dark streets. A person with money could buy safer movement through the night. A person without money waited until morning. This is a recurring pattern in the history of darkness. Night was never the same for everyone. For the wealthy, there could be servants, candles, guards, better doors, warmer beds, enclosed carriages and private courtyards. For the poor, there was more exposure to cold, darkness, smoke, crowded rooms, and risk. But even the rich could not make night disappear. They could only soften it. A palace lit by hundreds of candles was still vulnerable to flame, wax, smoke, cost, and labor. Someone had to light each wick, someone had to replace them, someone had to clean the holders, someone had to deal with the smell, someone had to watch for fire. Electricity gave people the illusion that light is weightless. Before electricity, light had weight. It came from animals, plants, bees, oil, wood, minerals, labor, and trade. And because it had weight, people used it thoughtfully. A candle was not background, it was an event. It marked intention. To light a candle meant this moment matters enough to spend flame on it. A pre-electric house after sunset was a very different place from the same house at noon. By day, it might be busy, noisy, practical, doors open, people moving in and out, sunlight falling through small windows, dust visible in the air, children running, animals calling. Work spread across tables and floors. But at night, the house contracted, the outside was shut away, the door was barred, the shutters closed, the fire became the center, the corners faded, objects lost their sharp edges, a bench became a shadow, a hanging cloak became almost human in the corner, a cupboard became a dark rectangle, the ceiling disappeared into smoke and dimness, and the household moved more carefully. Surviving the night began with closing the home. Doors before modern locks were secured in different ways depending on place, period, and wealth. There might be wooden bars, iron latches, bolts, hooks, heavy doors, simple locks. In poorer homes, security could be basic, but community mattered. Neighbors knew one another. Dogs heard movement, animals reacted. A stranger at night was noticeable. The house was not always a private sealed unit in the modern sense. It was part of a village organism. Sounds carried, smoke smelled, footsteps were known. A cough through a wall, a baby crying, a cart at the wrong hour, a horse moving too quickly, all could be part of the night's information. Inside, people prepared for sleep. Beds were not always separate rooms with individual mattresses. Many people shared sleeping spaces. Beds were valuable items. A good bed with a frame, ropes, mattress, curtains, blankets and pillows represented wealth. Poorer people might sleep on straw mattresses, pallets, benches, lofts, or simple bedding near the hearth. Servants often slept in workspaces. Children slept together. Travelers slept in common rooms at inns. Privacy, like light, was unevenly distributed. Bed curtains were not only decorative, they helped hold warmth. They offered privacy. They reduced drafts. They made a smaller chamber within a cold room. In a large house or castle, a bed with curtains could feel like a tent of warmth inside a stone world. In winter, people used many strategies for warmth. Wool blankets, linen sheets if available, nightcaps, sleeping in clothing, warming pans filled with hot coals, carefully moved across bedding before sleep, hot stones or bricks wrapped in cloth, shared beds, animals nearby, thick curtains, closed shutters, layered garments. The body itself was part of the technology of night. Hands tucked under arms, knees drawn up. People curled toward warmth. A family might sleep in the same room, not because it was charming, but because heat was survival. Summer brought different challenges: heat, insects, smells, crowding. Open windows might invite air, but also noise, thieves, mosquitoes, smoke, or animals. People used nets where available. They burned certain herbs. They chose sleeping places based on breeze. They rose earlier. They rested in the heat of the day when customs allowed. Night was not always cold. Sometimes it was the only comfortable part of the day. In warm climates, evening could be social, lively, and productive. Markets might continue after sunset. Families might gather outside. Courtyards cooled. Rooftops became sleeping places. The night before, electricity was not one universal experience. It depended on latitude, season, wealth, culture, architecture, and work. But everywhere, people adapted to the same basic truth. Darkness changed what was possible. Inside the house, the sounds of night were closer than they are now. No refrigerator hum, no traffic drone, no electric fan, no distant television. Instead, there was wood shifting in the hearth, wind pressing at shutters, rain on thatch or tile, a horse stamping in the stable, a baby sighing, a spoon settling in a bowl, a mouse in the wall, a dog turning in sleep, the breath of other people. This made people more attentive. They knew the normal sounds. They noticed the unusual ones: a loose animal, a footstep, a breaking branch, a cry from another house. Surviving the night meant listening. The pre-electric home was not silent. It was acoustically alive. And perhaps in some ways, people were more skilled at reading its small messages. Now imagine a village after sunset. The last orange line has left the sky. Smoke rises from low roofs. The muddy path through the center of the village is no longer brown, but almost black. A few windows glow, not brightly, just enough to show that life continues inside. The animals have been brought in, chickens are shut away, cows stand in byres, horses lower their heads, dogs lie near thresholds, tools are stacked or hung. The well is quiet. The church, if there is one, stands as a darker shape against the sky. A bell may have marked the evening. A final cart may creak home. Then the settlement settles. In such a place, survival was communal. A person alone in darkness was more vulnerable. A household inside a known community was safer. Villages had informal systems of awareness. People knew who belonged. They knew who was traveling. They knew whose cow had calved. They knew whose child was ill. They knew which old man coughed near the lane. They knew which door squeaked. At night, this knowledge mattered. The village was a web of recognition. Before electricity, there were fewer strangers moving casually through rural darkness. Travel at night was possible, of course, but it was inconvenient and often risky. Roads were uneven, bridges could be poor, forests were darker than imagination, rivers were dangerous, weather could disorient. A traveller might choose an inn, a monastery guest house, a barn, or the hospitality of strangers, rather than continue. The old advice was simple: do not be caught on the road after dark if you can avoid it. The village night also depended on animals. Dogs were alarms, geese could be alarms, horses sensed disturbance, chickens reacted to predators. Even the sudden silence of animals could mean something. Humans did not survive darkness only with human senses. They lived among other alert bodies. The village after dark could also be a place of gathering. Not every evening ended immediately in sleep. People visited. They sat by fires, they repaired nets, they carved wood, they spun thread, they told stories, they sang, they planned work, they discussed marriages, debts, harvests, weather, illness, births, and rumors. In many cultures, the evening was memory's time. When hands were too tired for heavy labor and eyes too limited for fine work, the voice became important. The old told the young what mattered, where the boundary stones lay, which plants cured fever, which neighbor could be trusted, which winter had nearly killed the village, which road flooded first, which family had once owned the meadow, which saint, spirit, ancestor, or local tale explained the strange shape of a hill. Stories were not only entertainment, they were maps, ethics, warnings, history. In the dark, a story could organize fear. A noise outside was less terrifying if it belonged to a known tale. The forest was less random if people had named its dangers. The night was less empty if filled with remembered voices. There were also formal night watches in some communities. Towns especially developed watchmen. A night watchman might walk the streets with a lantern, staff, horn, bell, or simple authority. He might call the hour, he might watch for fire, he might challenge suspicious movement, he might close gates, he might wake others if danger appeared. This was not glamorous work, it was cold, repetitive, and often dull. But dullness is part of survival. The person who walks the same street every night may prevent the one disaster everyone remembers. Fire was one of the great fears. A village or town made of wood, straw, and closely packed buildings could burn quickly. So neighbors had reason to care about each other's flames. Your careless candle might destroy my house. Your untended oven might threaten the whole street. Night safety was collective. This is why rules, bells, customs, and mutual attention mattered. Darkness made people interdependent. The modern electric night allows isolation. A person can sit alone in a bright room, entertained by distant signals. The older night pulled people towards shared warmth and shared caution. It was not always peaceful. It could be crowded, smoky, anxious, and uncomfortable. But it was rarely disconnected. In the village after dark, everyone was part of the same small island of human light. Before electricity, traveling at night was usually avoided when possible. The reason was simple. The world became harder to read. A road that seemed obvious at noon could become uncertain after sunset. Ruts filled with shadow. Puddles reflected the sky. Tree roots disappeared. Stones waited underfoot. A ditch could look like flat ground. A familiar path through woods could split into several darker openings. Without artificial lighting, distance changed. A nearby hill might vanish. A far lantern might seem close. A sound might travel strangely. Fog could erase all direction. Snow could make the landscape both brighter and more confusing. Moonlight helped, but moonlight was unreliable. The moon has phases, clouds intervene. Forests swallow silver light. Rain turns paths to mud. And in the old world, a wrong turn could mean more than inconvenience. It could mean exposure, injury, robbery, missing a ferry, arriving after gates closed, sleeping outside, losing an animal, freezing. So people planned travel around light. They started early. They measured journeys by walking hours, horse condition, road quality, and known resting places. Inns, monasteries, roadside shrines, farms, and city gates became important points in the geography of night. To reach shelter before dark was not cowardice, it was intelligence. In cities, gates might close at night, arrive too late, and one could be stuck outside the walls. In wild country, travelers might stop at a barn or ask for hospitality. In some regions, refusing shelter to a traveler in dangerous conditions carried moral weight. Hospitality was not only kindness, it was infrastructure. When there are no lit highways, no emergency phones, no service stations, no electric signs, and no headlights, a warm doorway becomes part of the survival system. Those who had to travel after dark used aids, lanterns, torches, companions, guides, animals with better night senses, knowledge of stars, knowledge of rivers, knowledge of church towers, hills, and wind direction. Some traveled by moonlight intentionally, especially in hot climates or when secrecy mattered. Caravans might move in cooler hours, soldiers might march at night. Smugglers, thieves, messengers, lovers, hunters, and fugitives all had reasons to move through darkness. But ordinary travel remained more dangerous. A lantern made a traveler visible. This could help others see him. It could also announce him. Light is protection. Light is also exposure. That double nature of light is important. A person carrying a lantern can see a few steps ahead, but others can see the lantern from far away. So travelers balanced visibility and concealment. In some places, night movement carried suspicion. Why was someone on the road at that hour? Why were they avoiding daylight? What were they carrying? Before electricity, night had moral meaning as well as practical meaning. Day was associated with labor, order, and public life. Night with rest, danger, secrecy, prayer, crime, intimacy, and the unseen. Of course, real life was more complicated. Midwives traveled at night. Doctors were called at night. Priests visited the dying. Messengers rode with urgent news. Fishermen worked strange hours. Bakers rose before dawn. Watchmen walked while others slept. The night had its own workers, and these workers developed their own knowledge. The baker knew the dark hours before morning. The sailor knew stars and tides. The shepherd knew the sound of animals under threat. The innkeeper knew the knock of late travelers. The monk knew the cold corridor before matins. The watchman knew which alley held fog longest. The midwife knew how to find a house by memory when all windows were dark. Survival before electricity was not simply avoiding night. It was knowing which parts of night belonged to you. Although darkness ended many kinds of labor, it did not end all work. Some tasks moved naturally into evening, some had to be done at night. Some became possible precisely because the world was cooler, quieter, or still. In households, evening work was often repetitive and close to the fire. Spinning, mending, carving, sharpening, sorting, shelling peas or beans, braiding rope, repairing nets, preparing food for morning, watching children, telling lessons. These were not always considered separate from life, they were life. The hands continued while the voice spoke. A grandmother might spin while telling a story. A father might mend a tool while listening. A child might learn by watching, half awake near the hearth. In some trades, night was essential. Bakers often worked before dawn, so bread would be ready in the morning. Brewers, millers, fishermen, sailors, guards, servants, and healers all had night duties. In castles and large households, servants rose early and slept late. The comfortable night of the wealthy depended on the interrupted night of workers. Someone carried wood, someone heated water, someone watched gates, someone tended horses, someone answered bells. Someone cleaned after feasting, someone prepared fires for morning. In monasteries, night could be structured by prayer. The sleeping hours were broken by offices. A bell might wake the community in darkness. Monks rose, wrapped themselves against the cold, and moved through dim corridors to chant. Their night was not empty. It was divided by sacred time. The body may have wanted sleep. The rule required wakefulness. This is another way people survived darkness, by giving it structure. Prayer turned night into order. So did watches. So did bells. So did routines. The human mind handles darkness better when it knows what comes next. First the meal, then the fire is banked, then the door is barred, then the child is settled, then the prayer, then the first sleep, then perhaps waking, then quiet, then dawn. In towns, some nightlife existed even before electricity. Taverns and inns could be lively. Markets sometimes extended into evening. Festivals filled darkness with torches, music, food, and crowds. Religious vigils brought people together through the night. Weddings, wakes, births, and emergencies ignored sunset. Humans have never simply stopped at dark. They negotiated with it. But the negotiation required fuel and risk. Every extra hour of activity after sunset cost light. It cost wakefulness, it cost safety, it might disturb neighbors, it might attract attention. So night work was chosen carefully. In winter, the long darkness created more evening hours indoors. Families might use that time for textile work, tool repair, storytelling, and planning. In summer, long daylight stretched outdoor labor late into the evening. The calendar of work breathed with the sun. Electricity later flattened these rhythms. It made every season more similar. It allowed factories to run shifts under artificial light. It allowed shops to extend hours. It allowed homes to become active deep into the night. But before that, darkness was a limit, and limits create patterns. People survived by fitting work to the light they had, not fighting the night every evening, but asking, what can be done by firelight? What must wait for morning? What is worth a candle? What is safer left undone? This question, but what is worth a candle, tells us a great deal about older life, because to spend light was to spend resources, and to spend resources was to make a choice. People before electricity did not necessarily sleep exactly as modern people do. Their sleep was shaped by darkness, work, season, class, noise, temperature, and custom. In long winter nights, especially in places far from the equator, darkness could last many hours. It was not always natural or necessary to sleep in one unbroken block. Some historical evidence suggests that segmented sleep was common in certain times and places. People might have a first sleep, wake for a while during the night, and then return to a second sleep. That quiet waking period could be used for prayer, reflection, conversation, intimacy, tending the fire, checking animals, or simply lying awake without panic. Today, waking at night often feels like failure. A modern person sees the clock and worries, but in a darker world, waking could be part of the rhythm. There was no glowing phone to pull the mind into urgency, no digital alarm to count lost hours, no electric light to fully restart the day. A person might wake, hear the wind, see the embers, whisper a few words and drift back. Of course, we should not romanticize too much. Old sleep could be uncomfortable, beds could be crowded, mattresses could hold insects, smoke irritated lungs, cold woke people, babies cried, animals made noise, neighbors were close, pain and illness were harder to treat. Fear could be real, but the structure of darkness did encourage rest. When light was scarce, activity naturally reduced. The body received clearer signals. Sunset dimmed the world, firelight softened it, night cooled it, dawn brightened it. Modern sleep often struggles because night is no longer dark enough. Before electricity, darkness did much of the work. People prepared for bed physically. Clothing changed if one owned night clothes. Hair might be covered. Teeth might be cleaned in simple ways depending on period and culture. Prayers might be said. Children might be soothed with stories. Doors and shutters checked. The chamber pot placed, the fire controlled, the candle extinguished. Extinguishing a candle was a meaningful act. The room did not remain visible, it vanished. Only embers, moonlight or starlight might remain. This required trust, trust in the house, trust in the door, trust in the people nearby, trust in routine, trust that morning would come. In wealthier homes, sleeping could involve elaborate arrangements. Bed curtains, servants, warming pans, separate chambers, better bedding. In poorer homes, it might mean bodies close together under rough blankets. In inns, travelers might share beds with strangers. This was not always considered strange. Space was limited, heat was precious, privacy was expensive. The bed itself had social meaning. People received visitors in bed. Important beds were inherited. Bed linens were valuable. A bed could be one of the most expensive possessions in a household. So surviving the night was also about having enough textile. Blankets, covers, curtains, clothing. Textiles are quiet technologies. They do not glow or ring, but they save lives. They hold heat. They create comfort. They make sleep possible. Before electricity, people were closer to the physical facts of sleep. Warmth, darkness, safety, fatigue, season, noise. The body was not yet surrounded by machines pretending the sun never set. Night arrived and most people had to answer it. Some answered with prayer, some with wine or ale, some with stories, some with work, some with fear, some with exhaustion so deep they slept as soon as they lay down. And all of them, rich or poor, urban or rural, young or old, slept under a sky darker than most of us will ever know. Darkness changes the imagination. A familiar tree becomes a figure. A fox cry becomes something human. A shifting ember becomes an eye. A coat hanging from a peg becomes a person waiting in the corner. Before electricity, nights were darker, and darker nights gave more room to the unseen. This does not mean people were foolish. It means the senses had less information. When the eye cannot confirm, the mind completes. Folklore grew in this space. Ghosts, fairies, spirits, witches, night riders, demons, saints, ancestors, household beings, protective charms, warnings about crossroads, wells, forests, bridges, graveyards, ruins, and lonely roads. These stories served many purposes. They entertained, they frightened, they explained, they enforced rules, they protected children from danger. Do not go near the river at night. Do not wander into the woods. Do not open the door to strangers. Do not waste the candle. Do not neglect the prayer. Do not mock what you do not understand. A supernatural warning could encode a practical survival lesson. The river spirit may be a way of saying that dark water kills. The haunted forest may be a way of saying that people get lost. The monster at the edge of the village may be a way of saying that boundaries matter. The ghost at the crossroads may be a way of saying that roads at night are dangerous. People survived the night not only with tools, but with stories that shape behavior. Fear is not always useless. Moderate fear keeps a child from wandering outside. It keeps a traveler from taking a foolish shortcut. It keeps a household attentive to strange sounds. But too much fear is exhausting. So communities also develop comforting beliefs, prayers before sleep, blessings over doors, protective symbols, herbs near beds, amulets, saints invoked against danger, songs, lullabies, the sign of the cross, a hand on a child's forehead, a candle before an icon, a verse remembered in darkness. Night magnified vulnerability. Ritual reduced it. Even today, bedtime routines work partly because they are rituals. We close the door, turn off the light, arrange pillows, check the phone, set the alarm, drink water, read a page. The form changes, the human need remains. Before electricity, the bedtime ritual might include words spoken aloud because spoken words filled darkness. A prayer, a charm, a story, a good night. To say something before sleep is to place order at the edge of unconsciousness. The night was also a time of dreams. Dreams mattered deeply in many cultures. They could be messages, warnings, temptations, memories, or nonsense depending on belief. People wondered where the mind went in sleep. They wondered why the dead appeared. They wondered why a future event seemed to arrive in a dream. They wondered why the body lay still while the inner world moved. Without electric distraction, dreams may have held more social space. A dream told at breakfast could become part of family interpretation. A repeated dream could trouble a person. A holy dream could guide action. A nightmare could be blamed on food, spirits, guilt, illness, or the position of the body. The old night was crowded with meanings, not because people were less intelligent, but because darkness, silence, illness, weather, danger, and limited knowledge made meaning necessary. Survival is not only the survival of the body, it is also the survival of the mind, and the mind survives darkness by giving it shape. A city before reliable street lighting was a place of sharp contrast. By day, it might be crowded, loud, colourful and active, vendors calling, horses moving, children running, bells ringing, metal striking metal, water being carried, carts squeezing through narrow streets. But after dark, the same city could become confusing and dangerous. Narrow lanes turned black, open drains, steps, animals, loose stones, and refuse became harder to avoid. Signs were difficult to read, faces disappeared. The wealthy moved with servants, torches, lanterns, or carriages. The poor moved carefully if they moved at all. Many cities had rules about night movement. Gates closed, curfews sounded, watchmen patrolled, taverns were regulated, suspicious persons could be questioned. Night amplified social control because night amplified risk. Street lighting developed gradually. At first, it was patchy. A lantern outside an important building, a lamp near a shrine, a torch at a gate, a requirement for householders to hang lights during certain hours. Later, organized systems of oil lamps and gas lamps changed urban night dramatically. But before widespread artificial public lighting, city dwellers survived by knowing routes. A person knew which streets were safer, which alleys to avoid, where the watch stood, where the taverns were loud, where thieves might gather, where mud collected, where a bridge began, where the steps were uneven. The city at night belonged to local knowledge. It also belonged to sound. Without engines and electric noise, certain sounds carried. Boots on stone, a horse snorting, a door closing, a drunk singing, a bell, a watchman calling the hour, rainwater running along the street, a cartwheel too late at night. The city was dark but not asleep. There were always night workers, bakers, guards, prostitutes, thieves, physicians, midwives, innkeepers, servants, messengers, priests, people caring for the sick, people returning from feasts, people hiding, people seeking. The pre-electric city night had layers, respectable household interiors, noisy taverns, dark alleys, guarded gates, religious houses, markets being cleaned, animals stabled, fires watched, and above it all, the sky. Even in cities, the stars were more visible than in most modern urban centers. Smoke could obscure them, but electric light pollution did not yet wash them away. A city person before electricity might know darkness and stars better than a modern rural visitor to a city. Urban survival was also about timing. Finish business before dark, return with companions, carry a lantern, hire a guide if necessary. Avoid unnecessary night errands. Know when gates close. Know where you are allowed to be. Know what your clothing signals. Know that darkness changes reputation. A man walking in daylight may be ordinary. The same man walking at midnight may be questioned. This social pressure shaped behavior. Electricity later opened the city. It made shopping, entertainment, policing, transport, and nightlife expand. But before that, the night city was narrower, more guarded, more intimate, more dangerous, and perhaps in certain corners, more mysterious. Imagine a narrow street after rain. The stones shine faintly under a lantern. A watchman's cloak moves at the far end of the lane. Behind a shutter, someone coughs. Above, a sign creaks in the wind. A cat crosses silently. A candle appears in an upper window, then vanishes. The city breathes, not asleep, only dimmed. In large stone buildings, night had a different character. A castle, monastery, manor, or palace could contain many fires, many rooms, many people, and many shadows. Stone held cold, corridors echoed, high ceilings swallowed candlelight. A torch might illuminate a wall, but leave the far end of a passage in darkness. Large buildings required systems, doors, locks, guards, servants, schedules, storage, kitchens, chapels, stables. The night did not simplify such places, it revealed their dependence on labor. In a castle, the great hall might be the center of evening life. There could be a large fire, benches, tables, dogs underfoot, servants moving quietly. The smell of smoke, meat, ale, damp wool, rushes and bodies. After the meal, the hall changed. Tables might be cleared. Some people retired to chambers, others slept in or near the hall. Guards took positions, doors were secured. The fire was reduced but not abandoned. A castle at night was both protected and vulnerable, its walls defended against enemies. But inside, fire, illness, betrayal, cold, and human error remained. The watch mattered. Someone had to stay awake. This is a powerful feature of pre-electric survival. Not everyone could sleep at once. In households, someone might wake for a baby or fire. In villages, dogs watched. In towns, watchmen patrolled. In castles, guards stood. In ships, watches rotated. Human society survived the night partly by assigning wakefulness. Some slept because others did not. Monasteries offer another view of night. Their darkness was disciplined. The day and night were divided by prayer. At certain hours, the bell called the monks from sleep. They walked through cold corridors by minimal light. The chapel might glow with candles. Voices rose in chant. The night became sacred time. For a monk, darkness was not merely danger. It was a setting for devotion, humility, and repetition. The world outside slept. The community prayed. In such places, candles had symbolic weight. A flame could represent divine presence, vigilance, memory, or the soul. Light was physical and spiritual at the same time. Large households also had sleeping hierarchies. The lord and family might have private chambers and better bedding. Important guests were given beds. Servants slept according to role, some near kitchens, some near stables, some near doors, some wherever space allowed. The grander the house, the more invisible labor made comfort possible. A noble person might wake to a warmed room, but someone rose earlier to make that happen. A guest might find a candle ready, someone placed it. A bed might be warmed, someone carried the pan. A chamber might be secure, someone checked the latch. Night survival was often delegated, but delegation did not remove dependence. It only moved effort from one body to another. In large spaces, navigation after dark was itself a skill. Knowing which stair turned sharply, which corridor had a draught, which door stuck, which floorboard sounded, which passage led to the kitchen, which courtyard was slippery after frost. Servants knew buildings in darkness in ways guests did not. They carried the map in their bodies, a candle in one hand, a linen bundle in the other, feet careful on stone, breath visible in winter, the building sleeping but not silent. Winter revealed the full seriousness of the pre-electric night. In summer, darkness could be pleasant. a relief from heat, a time of stars, breezes, open doors and outdoor conversation. But winter night was long, cold, demanding. In northern regions, darkness stretched across much of the day. The sun rose late and set early. Work had to be compressed into short daylight hours. Animals required care. Water could freeze. Wood had to be gathered, stored, dried, and rationed. Food supplies had to last. A household that failed to prepare for winter suffered. Surviving winter nights began months earlier. Cutting wood, drying wood, storing grain, salting meat, preserving vegetables, repairing roofs, mending clothes, preparing bedding, checking walls for drafts, ensuring animals had shelter. Winter darkness punished procrastination. At night, warmth became the main project. The fire was central, but fuel was limited. Burn too much, and the store might not last. Burn too little, and the household suffered. People managed heat carefully. They closed off unused spaces, gathered in one room, wore layers indoors, used curtains and hangings to reduce drafts, slept close, ate warm foods, drank warm drinks where available, moved bedding nearer to heat. The old winter night was not merely cold air, it was a test of planning. In poorer homes, smoke could be a constant problem. Chimneys were not universal in all times and places. A central hearth might let smoke escape through a hole in the roof or through imperfect openings. The upper air could be smoky. Eyes watered, clothing absorbed the smell, lungs suffered. But the alternative was worse. Fire meant life. People accepted discomfort because warmth mattered more. Water at night could be difficult. A bucket brought in earlier might freeze near the door in extreme cold. The well might be dangerous after dark. Ice made walking hazardous. So again preparation mattered. Bring water before night, bring animals in, bring tools under cover, bring fuel close, bring people together. Snow changed night in interesting ways. It made the world brighter. Moonlight on snow could illuminate paths, but it also muffled sound. It hid holes. It erased familiar markings. It made travel exhausting. It could trap people indoors. During storms, the house became a vessel. Wind pressed against walls. Snow gathered at thresholds. The fire snapped. People listened to the roof. A winter storm before electricity could be isolating in a way difficult to imagine now. No phone, no weather app, no electric heat, no headlights arriving in the drive. Only the storm, the house, the fire, and whatever had been prepared. And yet, winter nights also created some of the deepest forms of domestic culture. Long storytelling, seasonal songs, craft work, religious observances, shared meals, quiet games, repairing tools, teaching children, remembering the dead, planning spring. Darkness forced people inward, cold forced them together. And in that closeness, cultures preserved themselves, not comfortably for everyone. Not romantically in the simple sense, but persistently, patiently, one winter night at a time. After a long pre-electric night, morning was not just a time on a clock, it was release. The room slowly returned. A table emerged from shadow. A wall became visible. The outline of a chair sharpened. The window changed from black to grey. Birds began. Animals stirred. The first person rose. Ashes were checked. The fire was revived. Water was heated. Bread was cut. Doors opened. Cold air entered. Smoke lifted. The village, city, farm, monastery, ship, or castle reassembled itself in daylight. Tasks that had waited could now begin. A dropped object could be found. A path could be taken. A letter could be read. A face could be clearly seen. Morning solved many problems simply by arriving. This is something electricity has made easier to forget. For most of human history, dawn was one of the greatest technologies. It required no fuel, no labor, no payment, no wick, no oil. It came freely, though not always soon enough. Dawn restored distance. It restored color. It restored confidence. It restored work. It restored the known world. But the people who lived before electricity did not merely endure darkness helplessly. They built lives around it. They made hearths, candles, lamps, stories, curfews, watches, prayers, bed curtains, winter stores, village customs, travel habits, night work, seasonal rhythms. They learned which tasks belonged to daylight and which could be carried gently into evening. They learned that light was precious. They learned to sleep when the world allowed sleep. They learned to wake without panic. They learned to share warmth. They learned to respect the dark. And perhaps this is the quiet lesson of the night before electricity. Human beings survived not by defeating the night completely, but by cooperating with it. They let it slow them. They let it gather them. They let it end certain labors. They let it begin certain stories. The night was a boundary, but also a shelter. A danger, but also a rhythm. A limit, but also a kind of mercy. And now, as our slow journey comes to an end, imagine one last old room before dawn. The candle has burned low. The wick curls softly into a small orange point. The fire is mostly embers. The walls are quiet. Outside, the road is still dark, but not as dark as before. Somewhere, a rooster begins. Somewhere, a bell will soon ring. Somewhere, a baker has already risen. Somewhere, a watchman is finishing his last round. Somewhere, a child turns under a wool blanket. Somewhere, an old woman stirs the ashes and finds the hidden red glow still alive. Morning is coming, but there is no hurry to meet it. For now, you can stay in the soft edge between night and light. You can let the old world become quiet again. Let the lantern dim. Let the village sleep. Let the road fade. Let the moon move behind the clouds. Let the fire settle. And let yourself rest. This has been Need to Sleep, a calm story for a sleepless night. Good night.